Well, hey friends, and welcome back. So I feel like this is the video that you guys have been asking me for a long time. The difference between the Presonus StudioLive 24R and the Midas M32C. So I actually have both of these consoles in my shop at the same time. I'm in the middle of building an M32 fly pack, and I actually just used the StudioLive a couple of days ago for a remote recording session, which is why it's stacked on this preamp rack below. If you want to check out the video on the recording session using the 24R, I did make a video on that, setting it up. You can just check the link above the screen, or above your head, on the right-hand corner of your screen, if I can say that 3 times fast. And actually, it is with great sadness that I actually sold the StudioLive 24R. So I had it for the past 2 years, and one of the bands that I mix wants to buy it for their ears rigs. So this is kind of a thrown together video. I just got another M32C last week for a rig, and I thought, man, it'd be cool to put some videos and stuff together on that. And it's kind of unexpected that the guy that bought it is coming to get it tomorrow, so I had to make this really quick video. So let's see if we can make this quick. So looking at the two boxes together, here's the main difference: the size. And this is why I bought the Presonus StudioLive to begin with, is the size difference. I was going on a tour that was doing club dates, and I could only bring one rack. I could only bring actually this rack that it's in. It's literally been in this case for the past 2 years. And I needed to take some power distribution, and I also wanted to take a system processor with me so that I could beat up PAs, because my auxes were all full on this. And I could only have left-right out of this thing. The form factor of this is great. This is a 2U box. I think this is maybe a 12-inch deep rack. You've got 24 XLRs on the front here. These are all combo jacks. You've got a headphone knob on the front. It has the mute all, which, you know, obviously the DL32 has that also. And then it also has a SD card slot on the front, which I don't know why you would use that, but it is certainly very cool. You know, form factor on this rocks. 2U. It's killing. It's really good. It's a good looking piece of gear. You've got this brushed aluminum piece. The ears are nice and strong. This rack that this was in, this flew. I mean, it was a flight 8 tour. We did a bunch of different cities, and this was checked as airline baggage, and there's no damage to the StudioLive. I mean, obviously, it's in a very robust rack. Shout out to LM Cases, because, you know, I have to do that. But it's very good. So all of your inputs are on the front. All of your outputs are on the back. So looking at the DL32, we've got 32 inputs here, so obviously there's more inputs, and we have 16 outputs, so we also have more outputs. These are also XLR, which as we go to the back of the StudioLive, those are all 1/4 inches, which can be a bit problematic in my world. So, you know, again, this is taking 4U. This is an LM Cases 4-space rack that goes into a Pelican 1620. You know, the reason why I didn't take this rig out is because, you know, it would have filled my 4-space rack right here, and I needed the real estate. But again, you know, in this current config where there's the M32C, is a 1U processor. This is a 3U. Again, you know, going back, it also has the mute all function right there. But let's take a look at the back of this. So looking at the back, although it's a bit of a mess here because I'm in a bit of a temporary kind of situation, you have 23 and 24 inputs have RCAs. So if you want to use that for break music or an iPod or anything like that, you can. It gives you 2 dedicated left-right XLRs, and then everything else is 1/4 inch. So if you want to use those as aux outputs, matrices, any of that kind of stuff, it's all on 1/4 inch, which is a bit of a miss for me. You know, in a live sound application, you are hard pressed to find a 1/4 inch, a TRS 1/4 inch, other than, you know, to boot. On the back of the rack here, we have our audio network jack, which is in Presonus's world, its version of audio control and networking is AVB, which is excellent. AVB gives you access to other manufacturers. So in Presonus world, I can hook this console up to my Motu interfaces and use that for additional I/O. You also have a control RJ45 back here, which is to connect to a router so you can control with your iPad. And then also you have a USB jack, an IEC, and a power switch. So looking at the back of the Midas here, because we do have two interfaces, you can be in a situation where the M32C lives at front of house with you. So if you want to have a talkback control, or you want to have your router really close to your iPad, if it's, a situation like that, that's a win for me. Obviously you have to carry, 300 feet of network cable or so. But that being said, it does give you the opportunity to keep your iPad very close to your router if you're mixing from front of house. It gives you 2 channels of AES-50, which this is a bit of a miss for me on Midas land. The only thing that uses AES-50 is Midas products, which is a bummer. Because if you want to use anything else in this ecosystem, you can't. It's very, very closed. Going back to like Pro Series consoles, when those came out, if you wanted to hook your computer up to a Pro Series console and record, you couldn't. You had to buy a rack unit to interface that, which, I think really kind of killed them at the beginning, because it was just such a walled garden. Whereas, you went to an Avid console or something like that. It's kind of hilarious for me to say right now that you needed a FireWire cable, but you could do it. Or with Matty, you could also do it over Matty. But anything that you wanted to do in Midas land, you had to buy their outboard gear to make it work. So, you do have a little bit more flexibility here. You can tell that they made it so that the M32C would be at front of house. So you do have a talkback mic, a dedicated talkback mic with a little trim knob. You've got 2 outputs for local monitors, 2 banks of AES-50. So if you want to hook up 2 stage boxes, I can't remember. I think it's a DL16 is the smaller ones. If you want to have, one is like a drum snake or something like that, you could do that. They have their own little personal monitoring thing called Ultranet. So it's, I hate to say it's like an Aviom, but it's like an Aviom thing. So if, you're in a recording studio or something like that, you can control your own mix, or, if you're like a mega church or something like that has a big praise band. You've got MIDI, basic remote for Ethernet. And then you also have this Clark Technic DN32 USB card that's in here. And this gives you 32 in and 32 out. So if you want to record this or play back tracks from your computer or anything like that, you can do that. On the DL32, it mirrors a lot of the same. You also have a MIDI bank right here. You have AES. You have ADAT that goes over AES 50, which you can use, I believe, as expansion ports. I've never done this on any of the M32 systems that I've built, but that's definitely something to check out. Ultranet, again, what we mentioned. And then you also have your AES-50, and then you have USB, which again, USB on here I've never used, something that I would need to check out. So when we're looking at the physicalities of them, the winner in terms of size is the StudioLive, of course. 2U versus 4U, it's half the size. They also have the StudioLive 32R, which gives you 32 inputs in this same chassis, which is very, very cool. Which is why I think they probably kept the TRS outputs on the back. It's probably the same frame as the 32R. Now, the only reason that I give the StudioLive a hard time is I don't really like the app. That's really it. The console sounds great. All of the effects sound great. I just don't really like the app. I'm sure that it's probably user error in Presonus's defense and just my own ignorance of not really understanding how to change configuration. These faders are very small. It does give you this sort of heads up thing, so you do have a gate, a compressor, an equalizer, and a limiter on every single channel that you can just flip around and go to like that, which is okay. It just, the EQ's a little small, and it makes very, very broad cuts. So even when you adjust the Q, it just, I can get more narrow with the M32, with the Midas series EQs. And you can So it does go into a default parametric mode. You can make it a shelf if you want to. It gives you your high pass filter right here, which does give you a graphical representation. But as far as sonics go, this is really the only issue I have with this Presonus. I really don't like the way this EQ sounds. It's too aggressive and also not aggressive enough all at the same time. I wish that I could give it to you in more actual objective terminology, but in the subjective nature of sound, I'm perfectly happy mixing shows on it. I just would prefer the Midas. The faders are a little small. And then the other thing that really just sort of irks me about this is when you go to your VCA layers, so if you click your groups, you go to your group master, which is your VCA, again, they're just small. And I would bet that you could probably change that in some type of layer, maybe, I don't know. But to get back and forth, I'm so used to Midas's home button, because I've mixed on that console since 2016, that you have to click out of group masters to get back to your channels. Now, the cool thing about the Presonus is you have 24 VCAs. So if you want to get into a world where you're really breaking your mix out, that's cool. In Midas Land, you only have 8. So that can be very cool if you want to have, a bunch of your singers, so if you want to make like I do, I make a drum and bass VCA, where once I get my bass to kick relationship, I leave it all in the same, and then I just break everything out. So, I'm used to mixing on 8 faders. I can usually get, if it's a horn band, for example, I can get my drums, my bass, my percussion on VCA 1, put my keys on VCA 2, my guitars on VCA 3. I can have 4 singers, and then I can have my delay on VCA 8, so I can do that. If I have a 10 VCA console, I can put my drums, my drum verb, and my vocal verb on there too, which is nice. You just kind of have to slide around, but you do have access to all those faders. And then you can get really fancy and put your iPod on there, so if you're going break music and things like that. Again, is it a big deal for me to click out of the group master thing? No, it's not. Is it just a personal preference thing of zipping around on this app? Yeah. In contrast, we'll look at the M32 app. This does give you global meters up here, which is cool. The Presonus actually does that also, going back to it. It's actually just right down here, gives you all of your global meters. But I just like the visual aspect of mixing from this. You have a big knob, you have a big knob for your gain, you have a big knob for your low cut. If you engage phantom power here, it gives you a little indicator light on the front of the console here, which is cool. I don't know why that would really be a big deal, but sometimes when you have a dense XLR population like this, sometimes if you just hit the phantom power, you can find what XLR jack you're looking for, and it doesn't seem like a big deal in the context of looking at it in the shop when there's nothing plugged into it. But if you do have a show running and it's very dense, sometimes if you just need to find a channel, you can click your phantom on and you can see where it is. That's how I use it sometimes. You have all of the same stuff with the exception of a limiter on your channel strip. So you have a dedicated gate, you have a dedicated compressor, and you have an EQ. So, one of the things about the M32 that I like is the EQ. I think the EQs on this console rock. They're really, really good. So, you just engage them. You can do whatever you want here. You have a bunch of different EQ modes right now. So right now it's in PEQ, which is a parametric EQ. I don't know what the VEQ is. You have shelf. You can put any of your high band or any band into a shelf. You can put it into a high pass and a low pass. You can put it in, there's your low shelf, and then you're back to PEQ, which is cool. And then when you go to your outputs, you can put the EQ into filters too, which I think is cool. So, you know, you have your Butterworth filter. You can do 4 dB per octave, 12 dB per octave. This is a Bessel BS. You know, I like the Butterworth 24 dB per octave low cut. I tend to EQ my subs pretty aggressively. And because you have a filter that's that aggressive, you don't have to do anything as far as the system processor. The console can do it all. You're basically building your crossover frequency out of your matrices, which I think is great. So going back to the channel, you know, the EQs are really good. So I use an iPad mini. I think that that's my favorite format. I can grab stuff with one hand and do this. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this on camera, but I can do this and move stuff around with my thumb. And, you know, I'm not a very big guy, so, you know, I have small hands, so I can do stuff while I'm, you know, I can multitask with EQ, which I think is a big deal. The sends are very easy to access. They're on every channel. All you have to do is hit the send. You know, you can name this very easily, and then you can go into presets, which I have officially never used. You know, your effects tab is very easy to get to here. These are your effects masters. So, you know, you can assign these to a VCA if you want. But like, for example, I'll assign my delay effects master to a VCA, but, you know, my drum verb and my vocal verb I'll still grab here. So going between those things, you know, if you're mixing your show from your VCA level, you can get to your effects really quickly. But if you're on your Presonus land, you have to go to the effects tab. You can scroll through there to change your. I had this in an in-ear setting, so I had 3 individual reverbs, if you're wondering. But what you have to do to go to your effects tab is either go to each effect right here. So I have this mirroring my aux sends. So I had a 3-person band and they were all running stereo ears. So that's that. But you would have to go to your group. Or it's not your group masters. You'd have to go to mixes and then click your mix and then that. Oh, this is what I don't like. I forgot about it. So if you're in that group master mode, so let's say you're mixing your show, okay, and you're in your group master. These are all your VCAs for the show. You want to go back to your main channel. That's cool. But if you're in there and you're like, oh crap, I need to adjust somebody's mix, you go into this DCA level of effects. So again, in the quiet of the shop, in the context of me making a YouTube video, that's not really a big deal. But if you're flying around on the console, because these are kind of multi-function faders, it just can get a little confusing if you're not used to it, especially if you're used to another platform. So that was something that I think is just a bit of a miss on that. I would rather have the dedicated things than the all-in-ones. Going back to Midas land, let's talk about outputs. Your matrices are very, very easy to get to. So if you're in your left-right world, you can just go to the send on your left-right fader and feed all of your matrices. So right now I just have this in a very basic setup of PA left, PA right, and sub. It's all right there. You don't have to goof around with going into a routing menu to make an aux a matrix or any of that other kind of thing. It's all just right there. You get EQ over everything. You get a compression on everything. You know, it's just very, very easy. You know, when you're in your aux layers, you can get to that all pretty quick too. You know, here's all your mix bus auxes, you know, and it behaves just like the channels. If you need a compressor, you need an EQ, you know, you can send stuff to your matrices from your auxes, which is a very Midas way of doing things. My Heritage 3000 console works in the same way. You know, not that a great majority of you would know that, but it is kind of cool that Midas keeps their workflow between, you know, the old school analog stuff and even in the lower line digital consoles like the M32. Going back to be honest with you, I've actually never even set up a matrix on the M30 or the StudioLive 24R. I don't know how to do it. So I'm sure that you could probably flip an aux around and make it that. Oh, let's talk about routing. So here's where the StudioLive actually is really cool. Sorry, I'm in back to Midas land. Okay. The StudioLive rocks in this way. This is really, really good. So for every single input that you have on your StudioLive, you can configure it to independently be whatever input you want. Between an analog input, which is the XLRs on the front, an AVB network input, a USB input, or the SD card. So if we look at our global menu right here, so channels 1 right here has our little AVB network icon. And then if I go down to channels 7 and 8, these are an XLR. So this is AVB network, this is a local input. So, and if we go down to our digital return, it shows a USB logo, which is super cool. And then to assign stuff is very easy. So all you have to do is go AVB. We want to make channel 19 AVB. Boom. There you go. You want to make it XLR? There you go. USB, shaboop. There you go. That's awesome. That's really, really cool. And then when you go into your input world, it's just a grid. So, if you're a Pro Tools user, this looks just like Pro Tools. If you use Avid consoles, it looks just like that. It's very, very easy. So even all my soft patching right here is really, really easy. Going back to the M32, this is something that I don't really like as far as the routing goes. It can kind of be a little bit confusing, especially if you're looking at this quickly. Your main inputs are this. So right now we're connected to the DL32 over AES50. So this is your input banks. So it's bank 1 through 8, bank 9 through 16, and so on. You can't assign individual channels to come from different places. So for example, in Presonus land, if you wanted to have an analog input on channel 1, an AVB input on channel 2, a USB input on channel 3, and an SD card input on channel 4, you can do that. So when you link things, it's all in banks of 8 here in Midas land, which unless you're getting really crazy with some complicated things, if you're just mixing a band, it's not really a big deal, but it is certainly something to be said. So when you get into your virtual outputs, these are your 16 outputs, your auxes, your P16 is just another digital box. Here's your expansion card. You can assign all the expansion card outputs. Here's your AS50A, your AS50B, and then presets, which I've never used. I think that in summation, the real difference between these two consoles are Presonus works really, really well for recording. I have a couple of remote sessions coming up that I'm now going to use the Midas for, and I'm a little bit sad. I'm kind of going to miss my Presonus for this, because in Presonus land, I was able to take my Presonus console and run outboard mic pre's. So, for example, this session, I kept my drum kit and my vocals on my Focusrite ISA 828s. Not that the preamps in this sound bad, but I own these, and I own the 828s. I should use them instead of not. So I have that degree of flexibility to bring in different gear. I have to run my Motu interface in here, which is something that you're not seeing, but that does connect over AVB. The other thing that I can do with that is, if I want to use the Motu interfaces, I use a 24AI and a 24AO. Those will connect over AVB, and if I need more aux outputs, if you wanted to feed an in-ears rack from the stage, you could run an AVB line to the stage and have all that stuff go. So you could basically build your own digital split with this, whereas in Midas land, you'd have to get one of those Clark Technic, I can't remember what those things are, if you want to have more line level outputs to interface with that. And I think you have to buy another U of processing for that to make that work. But yeah, I think both consoles are really great. For a live sound application, I would take the Midas. again, it's very subjective. There's nothing wrong with the Presonus. It sounds great. The effects sound good. It's very, very flexible. It's a very compact size. I personally, the way that I mix with the way that I use EQ, and just the way that I kind of like to run my preamps in a saturated way with big EQ cuts, the Midas sounds better for that. I like the routing a little bit better. I can just get around on the console faster. That being said, I have like 7 years on a Midas M32C. I have about 2 years and maybe 10 to 20 shows on the StudioLive. So in summation, the M32 for live sound, I think, wins. I think if you're doing a combination of live sound, remote work, any type of broadcast mix, things like that, fly dates for in-ears and things like that, the Presonus wins. The fact that the Presonus can give you an assignable digital return channel for playback is amazing. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. It's really, really great. When we do remote sessions, everybody can listen to the show. If we do a take and it's, we're doing a full band remote session, which we do a lot, the band can have playback in their in-ears, which are also being driven from the StudioLive, which I think is great. So, it's up to the space requirements. It's up to the space requirements and it's up to your budget. I would take the Midas M32 if I was only mixing bands, and I would take the StudioLive if I had a whole bunch of different work that I needed to cover with one budget. The misses on the Midas are the routing can be a little confusing, and it's not very assignable. So if you want to move channels around and do that kind of thing, you can't really do that. The Presonus miss just to me is the app is just a little bit confusing, and I don't really like the layout of the faders, and I don't really like the way the EQ sounds. But I mean, again, that is very subjective. That's my own personal opinion. So I hope that helps. If you're interested in those two consoles, I have a lot of time on both of them. Just drop a comment below. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can. Sorry for the low budget GoPro on my head video, but I have to do this really quick. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate y'all. Catch you on the next one. Bye.